Welcome to Reclaiming Your Voice, the podcast where we tell the truth about what it means to live, lead, and show up fully in spaces that were not always built with us in mind. I'm Dr. Marva Tutt, educator, leadership strategist, and your favorite voice liberation advocate. Each episode, we create space for real conversations about identity, power, purpose, and the courage it takes to stop shrinking and start speaking. Today, we have with us Dr. Tiffany Townsend. So, Dr. Tiffany, tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, first, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Marva, for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I am a clinical psychologist by training. Um, but I've done most of my work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space more recently. So a lot of my leadership has been in diversity work, primarily in higher education. So I had been the chief diversity officer at Augusta University before moving on to become the VP of organizational culture and chief diversity officer at Purdue University Global.
Okay. So, beyond the titles, tell us who you are.
Okay, all right. So I am a wife, a mother, a daughter. All of those identities I think are very important. Friend, sister, auntie, and I play all of those roles. I would say where I see myself sitting now in all of those spaces is kind of an advocate. So I want to make sure that I am providing space for people to be their authentic selves, and I'm advocating to make sure they get what they need, however that is. If it's mom, if it's sister, if it's, wife, I am making sure I'm advocating to ensure they get what they need.
Good. So, how did we connect? Tell the audience how we connected and what made you say yes to this conversation.
You know, it's a small world in Augusta, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
The black professional world is small. So I think we initially connected because we were both on the same webinar. And I think that webinar was focused on black women or women of color, maybe not just black women, but women of color who had, recently been either moving out of a position, transitioning out either by choice or not. Many were not by choice. And we were both on that same podcast, same webinar.
Uh huh.
And then we connected through LinkedIn because I think we both had comments on the webinar, and you mentioned you were in Augusta, and I was like, oh, I'm in Augusta, and then we linked up on LinkedIn, only to find out that we had several people that we knew in common.
Right.
So one of my sorors is a cousin of yours, and then I find out even after that I knew your sister. So it's
Right.
just a small world.
It is. It is. Well, good. So, based on your work, and I have been reading through your book, and we'll talk more about that as the conversation goes on. But when did you realize that your voice mattered?
When did I realize? Say, um, I grew up in DC, and I say that to say that black black excellence was all around. Black folks were running the city. I mean, they were always around, and so there was always a message that your voice mattered. I think it was intentional. I went to schools in DC public schools. They used to make sure we understood that. Um, we moved out to the suburbs. I kind of lost my voice a little bit. When I was in DC, we were very much outspoken and doing the things, and there were so many leaders of color, particularly black, who were in the city and really serving as role models for young people. When I moved out to the suburbs, it wasn't quite like that. I lost my voice a little bit, then went to Spelman, and as you're growing in your identity, growing into your identity, you're figuring out what it means to be a woman. I think it was really helpful for me to be at a university or at a college where I didn't have to worry about the fact that I was black or a woman. All I had to do was just grow into who I was meant to be. So I love Spelman for that. And so I think there I really understood that, we could be anything. And a lot of my Spelman sisters are doing the thing because I think we had that foundation at, in college that our voice mattered. Um, I would say as a professional, because then you kind of grow into your professionalism, which I think is a different journey, right, than just growing into your identity as a black woman. So as I was growing to my identity as a professional, I realized um, once I became more confident in who I was as a professional, that's when I became more of a threat. That's when it actually became harder for me because I kind of knew who I was. I wasn't accepting anything less than what I thought needed to happen. And I was confident enough and had the skills enough to be able to ensure that that happened. I think that's when I became more of a threat. So I think there was a time when I understood what my voice was. Then there was another time when other people understood that my voice mattered. That those were different times, right? And I think once people realized that my voice did matter, I think I became more of a threat to some people in those spaces.
So you use the word threat. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. You use the word threat. Tell me about tell me about that. How you feel like you became a threat? Like to what audience? What where did you feel like you became a threat? And how did you
Yeah.
conquer that?
I think for me, um, the positions that I was in professionally, especially once I became had more administrative titles and kind of got higher up in the hierarchy as far as the leadership roles. Um, my role was to advocate for. It was to advocate for students that were marginalized. It was to advocate for faculty and staff that felt marginalized. And I think whenever you're an advocate for groups and you have to kind of speak out and you have to raise the flag or point out things, and I always felt like I was doing it in love, right? It wasn't because I wanted to call people to the mat and make people feel a certain type of way. For me, it was always in love. I'm only doing it to improve this space. But I think anytime you point out something that needs improvement, some people take that as a threat.
Understood. So, I got a couple of things. So you talked about when you were in DCPS and then lived in the suburbs. Leaders of color. You were outspoken. You were taught that way. And I've heard Killer Mike in interviews saying how a lot of times we as black people will move out to the suburbs or we'll move in places where we're sending our kids with predominantly white students for a what we think is a better education,
Mhm.
but we don't realize some of the insecurities that they come up with because they have not seen people of
Correct.
color. So you also mentioned in your book about your niece and you helped raise her and that sort of thing. So tell us about your experience growing up in a black world, so to speak, because I grew up in black spaces as well, and then how that turned for your niece, how that really helped her flourish.
Yeah, actually, okay, so it's interesting. So I grew up in black spaces to a certain
Okay.
time. And then when we moved to the suburbs, it was not that. But it wasn't all white either. It was very diverse.
Hmm.
And I think that helped. But I will say that once I moved from DC, where it was predominantly black, to the Maryland suburbs, where there were black folks there, folks from other groups, but it was predominantly white. I
Okay.
definitely feel like I had more insecurities in those spaces than I did when I was in DC, for sure. And I think part of it had to do with the teachers more than the students. So the students were diverse, but the teachers were not. And so we once I got out to the suburbs, most of my teachers were white. I had a few black teachers or teachers from other backgrounds, but for the most part, they were white. And I think the difference is the expectation and um, and what they want for you. You know, I always got the feeling, and I felt like this when I went to Spelman too, that there was a personal investment in my progress, in my success when I was at a black school. That they really wanted me to do well because when I did well, it really paved the way for others, and it served as an example to others who were coming behind me that you could do well. And so I think there was a personal investment. Not that my teachers from other backgrounds weren't good, glad that I learned, but I don't think they had that personal investment in my success in the same way. So I think for my niece, she was again in a space where there were lots of black students, but the teachers were not necessarily black. Not all of her teachers. And I think her experience of having, a choir director, which is what you referenced in the book, a choir director who was not black and did not appreciate the cultural aspects of her background, or any of the black kids there. I think there was an implicit, not explicit, but an implicit message that your culture isn't good enough for me to focus on that, that you need to learn the majority culture. And I think that's just a damaging message, unfortunately, that some students get in our school system.
I can agree with that, and I've been doing a lot of research on that and why teachers of color leave. And one of the things that they say is they don't see themselves in the curriculum, and then when they try to challenge that to see themselves in the curriculum and share that with their students, they're penalized in some way. So, I totally agree, and the research supports that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So, navigating through spaces, and you went to Spelman, and then you did PWI for graduate work, and then you've worked in diversity spaces and so on. Um, was there ever a time where you felt overlooked, underestimated, or misunderstood? And what did that season teach you?
Girl, I feel like I feel like that's all the time. Like I don't know if that's a season.
Okay.
I think that's kind of how I have experienced the professional world, and I
Okay.
think it's because of the fact that I'm a black woman. I look younger than I am. At least that's what people tell me, that I
Mhm.
look younger than I am. And so I think for a variety of reasons, ageism, sexism, racism, I am constantly underestimated. Constantly underestimated. I constantly have to go into professional spaces and prove that I know what you hired me to do. Like you obviously thought I knew it because you hired me to do it, and now I have to go in and prove that I have the skill set that you saw in me, at least on paper, and now I have to kind of prove it. So I feel like that's always been the case for me. Certainly, when I first started, my first professional position was as a faculty member. I was a professor. So once I got out of graduate school, I taught psychology at a major Big Ten university. And I definitely felt the imposter syndrome there, but I was also pretty young. I was the only African American faculty in a very large department. And anytime you have a new position, you have your first professional position, you're going to have a sense of that imposter syndrome to some
Right.
extent, right? Because you haven't really fully grown into your identity as a professional. And so I certainly had that. And then to add to the fact that I had to fight against stereotypes and racism and sexism and ageism and all the things, I can't tell you how many times people thought I was a student. I mean,
Okay.
so, even staff would be like, oh, tell your professor to come and do that. No, no, I am the professor. I'm asking you to help me do whatever. So this was a constant thing for me. And now that I've got a few more grays, it's not quite as blatant, but I still think I have to prove myself, unfortunately.
Wow. It's a it's it's not a good thing, but I do understand exactly where you're coming from about being underestimated, and then you looking younger and so on and so forth, and then the credentials that come with it, the people don't always give you your credit, and that does become an issue. So thinking about reclaiming your voice, what does that mean for you in this season of your life? I know you've transitioned out of your role with DEI, and then that's this show is about reclaiming your voice. So how do you feel like you're reclaiming your voice in this season?
So, it's so funny. It's funny how life works. So, when I first went to graduate school, I thought I was going to do what I'm actually doing right now. I mean,
Okay.
I got my degree to be a clinician, to hang out my shingle and to work and provide therapy to members of communities, marginalized communities, pretty much communities of color. Then I became a professor, and I didn't think I ever wanted to be a professor.
Okay.
Actually, I just kind of ended up there, and then my career took a different turn. Um, and now I think I'm coming back to what I initially thought I wanted to do, which was to provide clinical services and supports to communities and people of color. My primary clientele basis is Black women. I feel like I am doing a service to a community that often needs mental health support but doesn't get it, doesn't know how to access it. So I feel good in that I am helping a group that I know really needs the help. Um, and the other thing that I think that I'm really growing into is that I am my own boss. That's a whole different thing. Um, it requires some adjustment, right? Because there's some things that we get used to that I no longer have, right? Benefits being one, being able to just take off and still get paid, right? So those are some of the things that we kind of get spoiled with. But the thing that I have that I didn't have is the ability to say what I think, to get invested and do the work that I want to do, to say yes to things that I want to say yes to, and no to things that I don't want to do. When you're working for someone else, you don't really have that luxury. You often have to do things that are required for that position or for that institution that may or may not align with what you want to do in that moment. I don't have that now. And I really enjoy that because as things are happening in the world, and before I used to question whether I could speak about it or get involved in this group or do certain things to support this cause. I don't have that issue now. I can just do what I want to do, support the causes I want to support, and say what I want to say. Sign on to whatever. It doesn't matter because I can speak for myself, and so that's a great thing.
Good. So let's talk a little bit projects that you like. So tell us about the book. Tell the audience about the book. How that came about and where you're going with that. And
Yeah.
then invite them out Friday.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, thank you. I just have a book, Weathering the Storm, Navigating the Antisocial Justice Wave. That book was released by Broadleaf Books on May 5th, and it's now available in all the major markets, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you can buy books, you can purchase Weathering the Storm. That was an interesting thing. So, how did I get involved? I was in academia for a long time. So, I had publications, not books, but book chapters, journal articles, that kind of thing that you have to do when you are on that publish or perish kind of cycle. So I'd had that, and I'd had publishers approach me and say, hey, if you want to do a book, we're open, that kind of thing. But I just didn't have the time, didn't know really what I wanted to talk about, right? That I felt like was worthy of a full book. I could write a book chapter, I could write a journal article, but a full book, I don't know. And once I got into the DEI world, I started to do workshops and different things. And I had a mutual friend who was a literary agent. And I was talking to her because she's also a lawyer. I was talking to her about a totally different project. I do. I had created some programs for Calm. Do you know the app Calm?
I do. Uh huh.
Uh-huh. And so they have some kind of self-help programs. I've created two for their health provider arm, which is Calm Health. So I've done a couple of those programs and was talking to her about a legal issue. And she was like, oh, by the way, I'm working with this publisher and they're looking for someone to write a book on implicit bias. And she knew that I'd been doing workshops on implicit bias in the DEI space for years. And so she asked me if I would consider it, and I said, well, let me think about it. And I sat there and I thought about it, and I said, um, I could certainly write a book on implicit bias. I mean, I've done those workshops, but I just felt like that had been done and done well already. I didn't want to do that again. I just didn't feel like I could add anything new to that discussion. So I thought of a broader book because of what was going on. At the time, I was still in DEI, but I saw the tides turning. I saw people starting to turn against diversity, change the narrative, try to flip the narrative to call it divisive and discriminatory. And I could feel the change and people pulling away from equity and inclusion efforts. And a lot of my colleagues who were also in this space could feel it too. We were all feeling it. There was a sense of anxiety that was happening. So even before this wave came, we could feel it mounting. And I just felt like we needed to have a book to speak to that. I mean, I could certainly include aspects of implicit bias in the book, but I felt like it needed to be a larger discussion. So I wrote a proposal with that larger kind of um, idea in mind, and they accepted it. And so they gave me a contract on that broader kind of perspective.
All right. And I appreciate the fact that you said it's already been done and it's been done well. What can I do to stand out and be something different? And I think that's where a lot of times people get caught up. You got your story, somebody else has their story, and that's fine. But what can I do differently that's gonna make
Yeah.
me stand out? So thinking about that, what advice would you give someone who's afraid to speak up?
Um, I think everybody kind of comes to their voice in their own time. I think part of what makes you afraid is you're worried about the outcome. So I think one of the things is to be strategic, to be thoughtful. What's the outcome that you're wanting? What's the best way to get it? And then step into your truth, right? I think though, a lot of times what becomes hard is we feel like we have to go out there and do it ourselves. I'm going to speak my voice. I'm just going to stand there by myself. That's hard. I
Mm-hmm.
think when you have certain issues, you're probably not the only one in that space that has that issue. My strategy is always to get allies, to have a group of folks. that can speak to that issue with you, so that you're not out there alone. And you'll be surprised at how many people are experiencing the same thing or see it in the same way. You just haven't been comfortable enough to talk to each other about it. So everybody is sitting out there alienated and isolated when you're much stronger together. So I would say, if there's an issue, know that you're probably not the only one that experiences that, and then find your allies, build your team, and then together you speak.
I like that. I like that. Together we speak. I'm writing that down. So, we're gonna have a little fun here for a second, and then we'll wrap up. So, tell me right now, what's your walk up song? This is my favorite part. I love to hear what people say.
I mean, Jill Scott, Bless.
Okay.
I love it. Yeah. So anytime I just gotta, I listen to that song. I'm like, yes. And
Okay.
there's a one of her verses in there that kind of talks about the fact that you're gonna go through some tough times, but it can't pull you down. I mean, so that's my song.
Good. 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 All right. So we're gonna wrap up here. And then we're gonna see each other Friday
Yes.
for the book talk. And I will get back with you about that. But what do you want listeners to remember from this conversation?
Um, I would say to appreciate your own journey. You come to it in your own time. Don't allow anyone to make you second guess who you are. And then find your allies.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So before we go, tell the listeners where they can find you, follow you, support your work, or connect with you.
So my website is thecoreperspectives.com. That's my consulting firm, so they can find me there. I'm on LinkedIn, Tiffany G. Townsend. And I also have a therapy website, Core Integrative Psych Services.com.
Okay. All right, great. So, and to everyone that's listening, if this conversation spoke to you, make sure you subscribe to Reclaiming My Voice. Share this episode with one woman who needs it. And remember, your voice matters, your story matters, and you do not have to keep shrinking to make others feel comfortable. Remember, you were never meant to be silent.